morning. Okay, let's dive in. Hi. So for folks who maybe don't know, Linda, could you just give us the 30-second summary?
Great. So Linda. So at Linda, we are a mission-driven financial technology company focused on creating a pathway for our customers and anyone to have better financial health. And we do that by offering safe, transparent, personal loans and educational experiences for our customers.
Okay, so personal loans, a couple numbers. Recently, TransUnion reported that the personal loan balances hit an all-time high in 2018 of $138 billion. So that's up $21 billion from the year before. And they suggested that, fintech companies like Linda were part of the reason behind that. But what else? What else is driving the growth in those personal loans?
I think, Megan, the reality is that there's a really great need. I think there's some numbers that many of us in this room are fully aware of, that particularly when you look at the need and the need and what's really the access to credit in this country, there's some startling numbers. Number one, 56% of Americans in this country have what's considered a subprime credit score below 650, 680 range. Also, what's also happening in our country is we're seeing technology, and there's a lot of great growth in technology, but it's also impacting the way we work. So we've seen essentially a move from careers to jobs to gigs. And as a result, we've seen a lot more fluctuation in income. So there's been statistics and research, Pew and the Aspen Institute on income volatility, where Americans are reporting income fluctuation. So we see approximately, anywhere from 40 to 60% of Americans dealing with income volatility on a month-to-month basis. And the reality is that it is having an impact on Americans everywhere. And I think there's this misconception when we look at access to credit or who actually needs credit, who can't get the credit that they need, that it's this small minority of population someplace. But really, it's a vast majority of Americans. It's our teachers, it's our firefighters, it's people in communities that are living all around us that actually need credit, but they don't have the access. And we've also seen banks disappear in a large number of communities. So you put together the fact that there are more and more Americans that are considered subprime, so it's a lot harder to access credit. With the fact that there are fewer and fewer banks, we're beginning to see a lot more customers needing credit, not having the access, and unfortunately being forced to go to what has been very predatory options in their communities.
So when we talked about this initially, one of my first thoughts was, well, is there a reason that the banks won't lend to these folks? Like, those seem like risks to take for customers. And you had an interesting answer, which was that Lindup is getting to know these customers in a completely different way than the folks that won't lend to them. Can you talk about that a little bit?
And I think this is where there's a lot of opportunity as well. At Linda, we use a wider set of data, all FCRA, FCRA compliant data, but really to take a more holistic look at the customer, because traditionally across the country, most Americans, are just sort of stuck with this credit score, this FICO score, Vantage score that you're stuck with. And that credit score dictates a lot in your life. In some instances, whether or not you get a job or not, whether or not you can get an apartment, and certainly if you can get access to credit. And at Linda, our approach is really how do we keep the customer at the center of everything that we do, and also really focusing on how do we actually have a deeper understanding of that customer so that we can better underwrite and better understand that customer and provide them with credit where in other instances they might not have that access to credit. I mean, the typical Lindup customer's credit score on average is around 550. Average age around 38, some college education. And interestingly, our customers who are very savvy about their finances. I think there's a misconception that a customer who's considered underbanked or the more underserved customer is not as savvy. Very savvy. We constantly survey our customers. And when we ask our customers, would you rather have $100 or would you rather have a 50-point increase in your credit score, our customers overwhelmingly say they want an increase in their credit score because they understand what that credit score is doing in their life and how that credit score will translate into access. And so that's why a big part of our mission is to help with the overall financial wellness and health of the customer so that we can provide not only the access to the credit that they need, but how can we also provide them with the tools that empowers them to make better financial decisions that we hope that can help them along the way, whether with LendUp or even outside of their experience with LendUp, help increase their credit scores and their financial well-being so that they can be in a better financial position.
Well, and speaking of credit scores, this is something that you understand personally yourself, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And talk a little bit about, this is the mission of LendUp, and all of these things is actually quite personal for you, just based on your background. And I mean, you grew up with a lot of folks who potentially need the services that LendUp is offering.
Yes. So I'm from a tiny little town in South Carolina. So my town is the big metropolis of Johnsonville, South Carolina. I grew up with a town with one red light. I grew up on a dirt road. My town had 1,000 people in it. I think it probably still has 1,000 people in it. I was just there for Mother's Day. But the town of Johnsonville, I think, is very much like a lot of places in America that are often overlooked. The average income in Johnsonville, I think the last time I took a look was around $40,000. That average income in Johnsonville. Only 30% of the people in Johnsonville own a home. Everyone else is renting. And people are living paycheck to paycheck. We had a large plant that was in the town that sort of, really kind of went away, or a lot of the jobs went away. And with that, there was a lot of a need. And so I grew up in a town and in a community of people who work very hard. They love their families, but they did not have the quality financial services that they deserve, just like everyone else. And so growing up, I saw firsthand, and I still see when I go home. I was just there this weekend. I see people who are working really hard to make ends meet, and some months, they can't make those ends meet, and so there's a real need. There's a need for access to credit, and many of the people don't have that access to credit. And so for me, I talk about just even my own path of how I've even sort of went through my career, is that, I always go back to the first time that I had an opportunity to leave Johnsonville and go to a big conference. It cost $3,000. And $3,000, maybe somebody here in New York is not a lot, To my family, it was a whole lot, and we didn't have it. And it was, the nice ladies in my church, St. Mark AME Church, they banded together and they cooked barbecue chicken dinners and they baked cakes and they sold these dinners. And I get emotional when I think about it, because they sold these dinners to hard workers at the plant, the local plant, Tupperware in Wellman. And they bought these dinners because they knew that it was going to help raise money to send me off to this conference in Washington, D.C. as a young high school student. And that, for me, was an investment in me. And so every day when I wake up and I think about, work, for me, work is really giving a return on that investment in my life. So I think about, how can the work that we do at LendUp, that I do at LendUp, how can it help make whether it's financial services or whether it's policy, whatever it is, how can I help drive and create a better industry, create a better environment for those very people who sacrifice to just give me a pathway. So for me, it's not just sort of a job. It's not just something that I enjoy doing, but it's deeply personal because it's connected back to people who I know, who I love, and who's invested in me.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about your job. So your title, VP of Policy, Strategic Engagement, and Impact. So I've met a lot of people through my time at Fortune. I don't think I've ever met anyone with that title. So why does Linda need somebody doing what you do?
So I think so policy, engagement, and impact. So just a little bit, just to double click on a little bit about what I focus on at Linda. Number one is just really policy. Anyone here, I mean, we're at a RegTech and fintech conference. The area of financial technology and fintech and financial services, there's a lot of regulations that govern the work that we do. There's a lot of policy being developed that will dictate the industry in which we're in. And so it's important to have an understanding of that policy. It's important to build relationships with those that are developing that policy. And it's important when and where you can to help shape that policy. For us as a mission-driven company, it's extremely important because there's a great opportunity for financial technology to further service and to really create and fill a gap that's existing in our country. The other side of my job that I absolutely love is the opportunity to really help drive the impact of the company. So we take impact very seriously at Lindup, and we've focused over the years on how we not only share the impact that we've made, but how do we measure that impact? And so that's measuring. We've worked with CFSI. Many of you probably know CFSI. But to measure the financial wellness and the financial health of our customers. We constantly conduct consumer surveys to understand our customers. And then we also do the work of partnering with whether it's a nonprofit or whether it's an academic institution, whether to either learn more or to develop partnerships to add services to our customers. For example, we partnered with the leading savings nonprofit, Earn. When we were conducting a financial health wellness score of our customers, it came back, and what we found out is that a large number of our customers were not saving, and they were scored very low on their ability to save. So we've partnered with Earn, which is a national leading nonprofit, to go into a pilot in which we will offer our customers access to the Earn platform, and those customers, if they save consecutively, will get up to a $60 match in their savings accounts. And a lot of people sort of think, well, you're a lender and you're providing loans to companies, why do you want to create savings? Well, it goes back to the mission of how can we create and make a pathway for our customers to have better financial health. So that's the other exciting part of my job, that a lot of people sort of see the policy side, but not as much the impact side, and that's something that is important to Lindup. It's really at the center of our mission, and it's the work of helping drive the mission of the company.
So since we are at a regulation and compliance event, I do want to talk a little bit about all of the relationships that you strive to create with. I guess part of what's seems daunting about is that it's such a big crew, right? It's all the individual states, it's federal agencies, it's federal lawmakers, it's the nonprofits like you were talking about. So how many people are on your team? Like, how many people help you do what you do?
So we have, so on my team specifically right now, it's just me. We are hiring at Lindup, if anybody's interested.
Okay.
But we have like cross-functional teams at Lindup that we work with. I work with our legal department, our compliance department, In addition to, we have a social impact team, which we're hiring for. And then across the company, whether it's product and business, will also come in and help as it relates to policy or regulation, because the policy shop or the policy team doesn't necessarily the only one thinking about it. It's also the people who are building the products in the company are coming back and telling you, based on their understanding and experience in the business, on the side of the business, of what actually works, what's helpful, what's the best information and data to share with the policymaker.
So the specific relationships that you're trying to forge, like where do your priorities? How do you decide, which are the most important and reaching out to those folks?
Well, you're exactly right in saying that there's a lot of people interested in financial technology, which I think is a good thing. I think some people think the misconception is that most financial technology companies don't like all of the attention. There's a lot. The priorities really start, I can speak for Linda. It starts with where's the greatest impact to your consumer base and to your business. And so there's some agencies, of course the CFPB is a very important agency, and there's Congress and there's legislation, but also there's states. And I think lots of times people think just Washington. But if you operate in Linda, we operate on a state by state. We follow the state laws, and we are licensed in several states. And so those states are very important. So where we have, a state where we have the largest footprint, we will focus there. And then we also naturally focus with the agencies that have direct regulatory oversight of the business. And then when you think about where there's policy and policy making happening, we focus where there's policy making. And of course in Congress, most naturally, House Financial Services and Senate Banking is where most of the policies that pertain and are most germane to our business are the conversations are taking place there.
Well, and I know there's a new task force that's being created on financial technology out of that committee. Do you think that's going to be, is that a positive thing in your view?
I do. I think it's positive. I think it's positive that there is a conversation that is going to take place. There are going to be hearings. There will be opportunities to provide more information. I think having a task force will allow for any policy that's developed or any legislation to be informed. Mm-hmm. And I think that's always positive. I think the opportunity is for any company or fintech company to really bridge a relationship with the policymaker and or regulator to inform the policy making, so that the product that what we will have is legislation or policy that will allow for us to have a real impact, because it goes back to, for Lindup's mission and my own personal mission, is how can fintech really serve to put people who've been put on the edges back in the center. And so there's a real opportunity for policy and legislation to really help open the door for innovation, because, we look at, times have really changed. I grew up in little Johnsonville, we didn't, Silicon Valley wasn't a word that was any kind of word in Johnsonville, South Carolina. It's somewhat of a word in Johnsonville, but not much of a word. But also it is, we've seen mobile technology. I was just looking at just some statistics that, 95% of Americans have a cell phone, 77% have a smartphone, and I think the number is around 40% or 50% have used mobile technology for banking of some sort. So there is like a lot of technology, but a lot of regulation that was written well before the invent of any of this technology or even the newer technology that's coming out. And so there's an opportunity for the regulation to catch up with the innovation, but I think the relationship and the conversations that are educationally driven and data driven is going to allow for that regulation and policy to create opportunities for innovation, but also protecting customers as well.
So in a very practical sense, when you go about, so this new task force is probably a good example because it's a new group. What will you do to engage with them? Or what would you advise if somebody thinks that that's a group that they want to reach out to? Like, what's the best way to approach that?
Yeah, I think the first piece of advice that I would give is just understand the lay of the land. Know who's on the committee, what they care about. Historically, what have been the issues? Are there any other bills or policies that they have either authored themselves or they've been a co-sponsor of? And it just really starts with just, reaching out to those offices. They want to talk to us. They want to understand. They want to learn. And then also providing data and information about how you're serving, particularly if it's an elected official, how you're serving their constituency, what impact you're bringing to their community. So when you have that data, bring that data. And always just making yourself available if they have questions or feedback. And I think the important part of the relationship as well is bringing forth ideas based on data that you have. Here are my thoughts. Here's our recommendations. Based on working with this consumer base or working in this industry, this is what we've learned. And we think that this can inform the policy that you're making.
So do you have and what kind of results has Linda gotten from doing just that? Are there some examples that you have of working maybe with a legislative group of some sort that you've really seen some of your goals played out?
Yeah, so I could give an example. And it just sort of, there are a number of policies that we've endorsed or we've supported. One has been really looking at how do we deal with unlicensed lenders that are operating in the marketplace. As I said, we're a licensed lender. There are a lot of lenders that are not licensed that have been operating in the marketplace. And so for a year and a half, we educated local state elected officials. And so we worked with the National Organization of Black Elected Women, National Association of State elected officials, state legislators, the National Association of Hispanic State Legislators, and National Association of Black elected officials, all of which are bodies that really work in communities that are really impacted by this. And as a result, we saw two of those bodies pass resolutions that called on some changes as it related to unlicensed lenders operating in the marketplace. So there's still a lot more work to be done, but we've seen some steps move in the right direction.
So we only have a couple minutes left. So I guess I want to ask you kind of as we conclude here is, as the fintech universe continues to expand, fueled by the need, fueled by the technology, as the political atmosphere continues to change, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges and opportunities moving forward?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is the fact that the population and those that are needing greater access to credit is growing, and that's unfortunate. That this universe continues to grow, and there's all this excitement around financial technology, but the vast reality is that not all financial technology is servicing that 56% of Americans that I talked about. It's not servicing the vast majority of the people in Johnsonville, South Carolina. They are not. They're not on the receiving end of some of this shiny technology that we're all seeing. And so I think that there's an opportunity for greater advances and more technology to really focus on that consumer. And we see a lot. There are a lot of amazing companies that are thinking about that customer, whether it's Lynn Street or Even, and there's just Health Sherpa. There's so much that's thinking about that customer. There's not enough. And so there's an opportunity for us to continue to meet the needs of this growing population of Americans who've been shut out of traditional banking and in need of greater access to credit. And You know, you mentioned this earlier, like my own personal experience. Like I came out of college and my credit score was very low. I think my credit score was in the 500s. And I will never, ever forget the feeling of being, you know, super talented. I was student body president, but I made poor choices. I got a credit card back when they were just giving, I got a credit card for a Frisbee in college. And as a result, my credit sunk. And I remember coming to Washington, D.C., young and super excited, and being turned down for an apartment and being crushed. And then I also remember this moment when I was in the front office. I was doing anti-death penalty work at the time, and I did not have, my car got booted. And if you live in DC, if you ever get booted, it's like the worst feeling in the world because you have to pay that money right then and there. And I remember not having enough funds. And I remember sneaking into the front office when no one, early in the morning when I didn't think anyone was in the office because I needed to use the fax machine because I was getting a payday loan online. And I remember feeling really embarrassed. I was sneaking because I didn't want anybody to see what I was doing. But that was my reality. And I will never, ever forget that feeling of just feeling just hopeless and shut out. And as smart as I was, as bright as I was, I didn't have the access to the credit that I needed. And John Hope Bryan says this, he's the president of Operation Hope, that nothing will change your life like the love of God or whomever you serve, a 100-point increase in your credit score. And that's the truth. Because as a person now with a much higher credit score, super prime, it's a very different feeling. But I don't take it for granted. And every single day for me, it's like, how can we in our opportunities, whether we are a policymaker, whether we are a regulator, whether or not we are an advocate or we are in this industry, what is it that we can do and how can we actually use this technology, these advances, to ensure that no one in this country ever feels like the person that I was and how I felt those years ago when I was sneaking around to try to put my pay stub in or being denied for an apartment in Thomas Circle that I had saw my furniture there, but to be denied, it was so crushing. And for me, every single day in the work that we do at Lend Up is really to work to ensure that no one ever feels like that. So
that's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.